Hey, welcome back to Diabolic Shrimp, the least professional talk show on the internet. I'm your host, best-selling author and comic creator Josh Grant, and today on Diabolic Shrimp, our special guest is Ron S. Nolan. Ron likes to write. He's had this crazy adventurous life, and we'll dive all into all that as we go here. He's also likes to write like speculative fiction, like sci-fi, kind of going forward and looking at basing a lot of things on like things we're starting to see, like where it goes from sci-fi into like real life today, but like he kind of takes that into the future and kind of looking at like space exploration and like robotics and things. And so do check out his work down below. It's all down there in the description. If you're watching live, welcome. We love to have you on here. We'd love to have you ask some questions. If you have a question for Ron, throw it out there in the live chat. I'll bombard him with it, but I'll put him in the hot seat. We already have Asher Taylor. Asher Taylor says hello. Well, hello, Asher Taylor. And so welcome to Diabolic Shrimp. Well, I've had Ron down there in the wings, so just a bit about him before we bring him on. So Dr. Ron S. Nolan lives in Aptos, California, near the sunken ship at the end of the pier in Sea Cliff Beach. So he might be a Bond villain. He lives in a sunken ship. No, he spends his days working out, running, writing, and performing investigations as an independent tech patent researcher. But he has also had a very crazy and adventurous life. And I really want to dive all into it. So he's been waiting in the wings, and he has, I can see him. You guys can't see him, but he's got a special surprise. So let's go ahead and bring him on. Ron, welcome to Diabolic Shrimp.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. This is a real opportunity. And as you can see, I'm ready in case it rains.
Yes. Well, I was like, I now I kind of want to have like a splash tank on the show. We're going to dump a bucket of water on you, every third question or something.
Yeah. Well, that's the first surprise I wanted to bring you. Now I'm going to bring you a second surprise.
Yes.
You get rid of this.
Ron's ahead of the game here. He's you're ahead of the game already with I was going to ask you about show and tell. We always make people do show and tell, and you're already ready to rock. I was like, everyone should be as prepared as you.
well, I have three actually. And
yes.
The next one is a ring.
Nice.
And that ring belonged to my grandfather, Frank Orrin Graves. And what's interesting is that his mother, Minnie Graves, was born in Emily Dickinson's barn.
Interesting. Yeah. And definitely. Let's dive into that, and then we'll show your last one too. Because I actually had a question about that. I was going to say you have this connection with Emily Dickinson. So yeah, tell us a bit about that. You said he was born, or his mother was born in the barn.
My grandfather's mother. Yeah.
So in Emily Dickinson's barn, huh? So how'd that happen? Like, what was the connection there?
That is a major unknown, and actually, I've gone decades without even being concerned about this. Somehow I got interested, and I'm working with the Dickinson Foundation, and we're looking into I guess you call it the family tree. And but what's interesting about this ring is, if we get to the segment on psychic phenomena, it plays a role there too. But I don't want to give away the secret yet.
Interesting. Okay. Well, it kind of looks like Green Lantern's ring, so I'm half expecting you to be able to shoot powers or something, Ron. Yeah. So, all right. So, what was your next thing for show and tell? You've already blown me away. You get extra credit for having multiple show and tell things.
Okay, here you go. It's piece of coral.
Oh, nice.
This was collected by my birth father in the Philippine Sea during World War II. And we lived in Kansas, and see KU up here.
Yeah.
Basketball. We lived in Kansas, and I think this brought me to become a specialist in coral reef ecology. And if you go to picture one, can you do that?
Sure. Yeah. Well, let's bring up some pictures here. So here, Ron, I'll get both of us up here. Sorry. Oh, that's flashing ahead here. So we have picture number 1 with the polyps.
Yeah, that's right. What I'm doing is explaining here the symbiotic mutualistic relationship. Um, Corals have a calcium carbonate exoskeleton. We have an endoskeleton. This is a home for uh, polyps that secrete the calcium carbonate, and for zooxanthellae, which are algae that live within the coral. And the algae provide oxygen and food. The polyps provide a safe place for the zooxanthellae to live. And what's interesting is that I was a student at Scripps Institution of Oceanography, and I had the opportunity to go to Micronesia. And the first place we went to was to investigate the craters, 2 thermonuclear bombs, uh, which you can look at in.
Yeah. So, well, and let's look at like, all right, well, yeah, let's dive on into, yeah, for people that don't know, like you were just explaining, you got this love of the ocean, like myself, right? And it's like, from a young age, and it was just interesting because you said you're from Kansas, which is like the most landlocked state ever, and I kind of have a similar background with you in that sense of like, I'm in a super landlocked place, and but I got this love of the ocean. But you went out and you were sent into it was the Marshall Islands, yes, and you were sent in to kind of assess, like, after all of our nuclear testing as a nation. And this is something I've always wondered about, because like you see the videos, and you can see the picture that we have up there right now. It's like you see the videos of us testing all these nuclear weapons, right? And that led into all of our modern version of nuclear weapons. And you always like wonder, like, well, what happened afterwards? They blew up that island, it's like, and then what? It's like connected to the ocean. What happened to all the radioactive material? And so you were sent in, yes, to like to kind of like assess like whether or not that's still leaking into the ocean. Is that correct?
Yeah, more or less. We were sent in to put trust back into the trust territory, led by Professor John Isaacs. And we, according to the Atomic Energy Commission, the radioactive levels were much reduced, were safe to go to. Later we found out that wasn't the case. But if you look at the third picture, picture 3.
Like the aerial photos?
Picture 3, crater arrows, yeah. Oh yeah, you can see 2 of the, this is Cactus Crater, and that's the Lacrosse Crater. And even though the radiation was supposed to have died down, see, these tests were conducted in 1952. And even though in 1972, when I got there, it hadn't, but we didn't know that. In 1979, the government installed the dome. What they did is they scraped up all the radioactive material on the island.
Uh-huh.
There was, 50 tests in Micronesia, and they brought all that and filled it up, this Cactus Crater.
That's incredible. Here, and I'll show you a picture of that. Like here's another.
Yeah, right. They put the concrete's about 2 foot thick, and covered it, made a dome. And then if you look to the next picture, number 5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there we go. And
which
is this incredible, like these, like, the massive projects that had to go into, like you said, going around and scraping everything up. Like, I don't even know, like, just the logistics of that, of just like, how did, I mean, you might not be able to see it so well on our audience's end, but looking really close, you can just see those look like people standing on top of this. They're just little dots.
Yeah.
And
unfortunately, several people died during this
from the radiation. Yeah.
And it's still leaking badly today. But so how does this fit into novels? Well, it turns out that I made a surrogate. That is, the marine biologist that's in the books his name's James Morrow, and he does investigations, builds artificial reefs, just like I did. And
Hmm.
I liked it. But what's interesting, in the year 2030, we had a chain of robot-controlled satellites that orbited the Earth, and they were supposed to protect the United States of America Corporation, USACO, which you can tell is a little bit similar to what we have now.
Yeah.
And anyway, um, the one of the satellite, well, for reasons which are too detailed to figure out right now, one of the satellites, driven by android named Neuro 13, crashed on Runit Island, discovered the plutonium in the craters and that were covered by the dome, and harvests it and sends it back via airship to Travis Air Force Base, uh, which had a nuclear explosion beforehand and was now in control of the Neuro clan of robots, androids, actually. Is that
Well,
usually enough?
well, I was like, this is what I loved about like, well, it's like I love how you not only you have this like amazing just life adventure, and you took a lot of your own experience and put it in the book, but you also take a lot of like these like realistic like honestly things we're seeing nowadays that used to just be, it blows my mind. Things I never expected to see in life that used to be, strictly in the realm of science fiction that are now becoming, actually they're starting to become more and more common, and especially with AI. And we're going to dive super into to metamorphosis, but I want to back up just a little bit and talk a little bit about your life experience, because like you say, a lot of what you did, checking on like the nuclear waste and everything, it's like, and working with the ocean feeds into your book. And so I'm curious, actually, kind of working off that, you currently live near like a sunken ship. You've lived in like in the past like kind of a rundown restaurant and a nuclear crater. So like, how is living in these kind of out there places inspired kind of your worldview and your writing?
Well, one example would be in my first book, The Telepathic Dolphin Experiment,
Mm-hmm.
which originally was entitled Grant's Pet Shop.
Ooh, I get my own pet shop. That's my last thing. Here, I'll throw a picture of that out there, by the way. Telepathic dolphin experience.
Oh, good, thanks. Um, yeah, it starts off in Key West, Florida, and I spent quite a bit of time in Florida, and I loved the Key West area.
Did you go to
And
the pepper shop?
no, but I went to several places that the Hemingway family used to frequent,
Uh-huh.
and um, I actually became really good friends with Jack Hemingway, Ernest Hemingway's son, and we shot a movie down there in Key West.
Nice.
Fly
Nice. What
fishing, yeah,
shot a movie about what?
fly fishing in the Florida Keys.
Okay, fly. I did not even know the Florida Keys had fly fishing. I used to take kids sailing like the Florida Keys all the time, and we would end up in Key West. But I had no idea they had fly fishing. I know that they have like six-toed cats, which is a thing, but but fly fishing. All right, so
Six-toed cats, huh? That's interesting.
yeah,
Uh,
it's unique to the how cats were bred on Key West. So they have these six-toed cats. It's like really strange.
well, I don't want to give away the plot of my next or the book that you received, Metcon New Humans, but there is a interesting thing to do with toes.
Okay, like hey, toes and genetics. All right, so like, well, all right, so let's stick with the ocean for a second, then we'll kind of dive more into the book. Like, I mean, like I said, you have a heart for the ocean, like myself, and I gained a love for the ocean at a younger age as well. And so, tell us about like your experiences, like working with ocean life, and especially like since we're Diabolic Shrimp, you set up like I think it was like the first shrimp farm on like Hawaii, right? And so it's like or one of the early ones. And so you set up this like shrimp farm that kind of grew into this shrimp company. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I was on the island of Molokai, and I really got a lot of support from Molokai Ranch at the time. We had 200 acres right on the water, right on the reef there, and it was a beautiful place. And once I got it going, I realized that I had no idea what I was doing business-wise, and so I sold my interest. And it's still going today, which is good news. I just checked.
Nice. I was like, well, it's just like me. When I set up Diabolic Shrimp, I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but unfortunately, I'm still doing it. I just kind of muddle on through.
Yeah.
It's an adventure, and so well, that's I mean, why like what possessed you just in the beginning, just to be like, I'm going to set up a shrimp farm, or what?
That's a good question, and I'm not sure exactly. I just saw the opportunity and figured out how to raise money and put together limited partnerships and did a lot of trade shows and raised the money to do it. It was all an educational experience.
I love that. It's like I just think that's so important in life. And Diabolic Shrimp. A lot of people on here are like indie authors and things that's connected to the website that this is connected to. If our audience doesn't know, but like it's kind of all about like in like publishing or just doing anything in life. It's like it's all about having that will to just try. And I mean, you might fail, right? But it's like, or you might not know what you're doing and you get out of it. But it's like, but it's really important to just try. Now, trying new things. You come from the science background, but then at one point you end up working with like a psychic. So what was that all about?
Well, now, how was that happening? Yeah, that's a good question. Um, I did want to finish off with the reason I sold the shrimp farm was I started a chain of seafood restaurants, and one of them was in Ketchum, Idaho, where I had the great fortune of meeting Jack Hemingway and all sorts of
Uh
movie stars, Scott Glenn, uh, just dozens and dozens of famous people became friends with. What an opportunity! Then I came back and got back into day trading, and I was multi-rich, making lots of money. Then all of a sudden there was this thing called the dot-com crash.
yeah.
19, yeah,
Yeah. It's like that nuclear dome collapsing or something, with the
right.
dot-com bubble crash.
So I went from ultra rich to ultra poor, and now I'm back in the middle somewhere. Um, yeah. So back to psychics. I had the great opportunity to uh, work with a real life psychic, and I explained in my notes that it has been a source of confusion for me ever since. I spent a lot of time with Adele Tinning, and she could talk to spirits. Uh, she could communicate with them with a just a tremendously silly way, and that was through a kitchen table. And she would tap out letters, A, 1, 2, 2, and get messages. But the messages that she got were, for the most part, only only the person asking the question would know the answer, and she would figure it out. And that's where this ring comes in. You'll see that I was doing an experiment with her. Uh, see what was that? Oh, number 6. Picture
Yeah,
6.
sorry, it closed out on me. Sorry about that. That's what I was trying to figure out. It's like it was it's being finicky today. I'll get it up there here. Oh, and that's the dolphin experiment. Wake up thing. This is why we're the least professional talk show on the internet. It's all part of it. So all right, so yeah.
Here she is, and the table's levitating. There's nothing underneath the bottom of the table, um, and
And
there's
there you are. I can see your ring in there too.
the ring. And as I have told you in the past, or recently in the past, this has been a matter of this just cannot happen, but it does happen. So how do you relate to that? And the only thing that I can think of right now is that cosmologists are inclined to believe that we are the remnants of a tiny singularity, that it exploded and created all matter and all energy. Well, okay, where did singularity come from? I mean, are there lots of singularities? I don't know. But it just, I guess the point is that science really has a lot to figure out that would make it in concert with the spiritual world.
Yeah, well, I'm fascinated. Like I'm a spiritual person. I'm Christian, but I'm all and I'm also in a science background, so I'm also a big time skeptic on things and all that. But I also believe that there's more to the world than meets the eye personally. And but I think that those actually can go hand in hand, like science and spirituality, in the sense of kind of like what you were talking about. Us living in a singularity. I just find that fascinating because time bends around a singularity, like space bends around a singularity, and we were the kind of the result of that. But something else that also fascinates me, and I'm curious to get your take on it, is what are your thoughts on like multi dimensions, because if you stack up the infinite number of the previous dimension, that becomes the next dimension. So if you stack up endless dots, it becomes a line, and that becomes the first dimension. If you stack up endless lines, it becomes a plane. That's the second dimension. If you stack up endless planes, it becomes a cube, essentially, and that's kind of what we live in, the third dimension. And if you live in a dimension above, you can manipulate every aspect of the dimension below, and you can see every aspect, but you can't interact with the one above you, and but it can interact with you. And that's what fascinates me about things like you were mentioning with psychic, and when people talk about ghosts and aliens, I often think, could it be like somehow seeing through the veil in a sense of like this dimension above us? And so I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree with you. I think you're very enlightened related to this. And, I think
Thanks. I think you're the first person that's ever called me enlightened. God help us all if I'm the enlightened one.
Yeah. Well, in my books, we have several psychics. Well, it starts with the telepathic dolphin experiment, Dr. Sandra Grant, that named after you, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. All grants are named after me. Thanks, Ron, for honoring me in your book.
But she has a daughter named Madeline and a son named Scotty that both have different, extra dimensional talents, and they keep showing up in my books. I'm not sure who put those in there, but they're in there.
Yeah, well, and I just also, it's like I always encourage other people. We have a lot of young people that will watch this, and I'm like, I encourage people like write a book because it gives you such a deep view on things, and I think sometimes that's meant to be. I kind of believe in sometimes there's just no consequences. It could be not consequence, but no coincidences really. And so I believe that things happen for a reason personally. And so all right, well, like let's dive into your book real quick. Let's talk about the Metamorphosis series, and you've written multiple books, and we can talk about them all. But let's talk a little bit about Metamorphosis. And here's the first few lines from Metcron New Humans. This is from the prologue, which is a little bit more informational. And so from Metcron New Humans. And I always do the anytime I'm reading a book, I just to entertain myself, I guess. It's like the first few lines. At the end, I add like, and then the murders began for the fun of it. It's my test to see if it works, just for the fun of it. So let's see if it works for yours. So here we go. This is Metcron New Humans from the prologue. In the year 2030, citizens around the world were desperately struggling to recover after decades of intermittent viral pandemics. I guess we're used to that. And to make matters worse, world tensions due to severe climate change, overpopulation, and the depletion of critical food resources had resulted in escalating military conflicts and widespread acts of terrorism. And then the murders began. It actually kind of works. And so, yeah, so this is something I love about your work, Ron, is like you take things that really are like in our wheelhouse. We're all seeing it. Like we have, you know, pandemics, and we have doctors talk about, you know, there could be more dangerous pandemics on the road, and medical terrorism. We have you know, we have like climate change, and we're seeing the effects of that and kind of ravaging things, especially the ocean. And so and you take these things and you kind of bring them into the future, that's kind of speculative fiction piece. And so just tell us a bit about like the Metamorphosis series in general. You mentioned a bit earlier with the with robots and getting the nuclear material. You mentioned a bit earlier about, you know, a psychic being part of it. So tell us about this series just in general.
It's evolving. Basically, in your idea of giving or young people the idea about writing, if you look at movie actors in the entertainment business, they start off as kids and they work their way to be grandpas. But writers never age. You're always the same.
Truth, truth. Unless you're me, I was like, you know, I was like 40 since I was 5. I'm an old soul.
Oh, Adele would like to talk to you then. Put your hands on the table and see what happens.
I don't have the cool ring though.
Right. Well, I think that, you know, there are certain obvious things that are so ridiculous that I just have a hard time understanding how we could live on just a speck of dust in a huge expanding universe. And we kill animals and eat them. We fight people because their skin's a different color. It just doesn't make sense how we could be so enlightened and so stupid at the same time.
Yeah, you're the enlightened one. I think I think I'm representing the stupid over here. But you know, I meshed with you on that, Ron. Like I years ago I wrote my book Nexus, which is my look at the future in robotics and where we're going with like robotics. And I looked at I listened to one of the lead developers of robotics in the world. He was giving a talk. He was giving a lecture about how humans are no different than robots, and how like robots should surpass us and take over things. And it did not resonate well with me in the sense of like, you know, I really like love life and humanity and value that, and I'm a spiritual person as well. So for me, I'm like, well, we have a spirit, but then it really got me thinking like, what does make humanity different than machines, and why am I making that argument? And like I really looked at that, and it was kind of like what you're talking about. Like, we are so destructive and dangerous, just like anything else, except for we have like sometimes a higher intelligence than some things, and like the ability to make more dangerous tools. And we have the power to utterly destroy ourselves and our entire planet, which in some level we're kind of doing with like things like climate change and stuff, and the ability with nuclear weapons, but we don't at the same time. So it's kind of that like enlightened but also stupid, and it's kind of like looking at that as humanity. And so you built Metamorphosis, like that series, and here, let's dive into it. Like, your series covers like several threats facing humanity. What would you say is a major threat facing humanity as we go into the future?
That's a good question. I think that the biggest threat to humanity is androids, robots, artificial intelligence, all of which have so many more skills that can be programmed into them, and they can learn and improve themselves. Figure a robot factory that, instead of making robots, it makes more robot factories. Uh, think about how long it took for a human eye to evolve, and millions of years, and that evolution in AIs, robots, androids can take place in milliseconds. Um, you know, I guess this is good news, because Domino's announced yesterday on CNN that it has just launched its first autonomous robot pizza delivery car.
As it's like as it shows up and you beat down the pizza delivery vehicle. That's moderately terrifying as it shows up to your door. It's like, and do you still get to yell at it if your pizza's not, not hot still? Does it give you a refund?
Well, the
uh,
figure is that the pizza was made by robots to begin with, and then sent to the recipient via the robot car. I mean, are there any people in the loop anymore?
yeah, well, it's like it blows my mind here. I'll tag on to that. We had Dr. Wild saying hello. So hello, Dr. Wild, down in the comments. But so like what blows my mind is it used to be like the safety net for humanity was we've had for years really powerful AI, and we use AI in all sorts of stuff and YouTube even and all that. But the thing that's been the safety net is like robots like don't have like the same level of evolution as we have in our bodies of adaptations and like sensors and balance and all that. And it's starting to get to the point where that's not the case anymore. And I was blown away when I watched the other day about Boston Dynamics having the dancing robots, which I think are awesome. I think we could have a Star Wars feature. And yet, like you said, like once you get that runaway, like where they can evolve themselves and design themselves, then we're in trouble. And we're actually kind of getting to that point. It's what they call the singularity. And we're almost there, to be honest, and faster than I ever expected to see in my lifetime.
Absolutely. And probably ultimately the real threat is that androids are perfect for space travel. I mean, they can launch on missions that would take hundreds of thousands of years, arrive in their destination, and be just the same as they left. Um, so if we want to conquer or control space, we're going to have to figure out how to control robots.
Yeah, well, and so this is what I'm curious from you then. It's like, because this is the tricky question. It's kind of like because they're like robots and machines. It's like the genie, and once you let the genie out of the bottle, it's like you can't put it back in there. It's like toothpaste, right? And so what how should we treat machines and technology going forward then? Because we're kind of already there where it's like we're already super reliant on technology. Like how do we what way do we do to solve that?
People that are in charge of businesses that want to make more profit for their shareholders are going to adapt and use these, I call them metallics, as opposed to us organics. And that is going to be a problem because Amazon's delivering packages with drones right now. Financial markets are controlled by AIs. They don't want you to know that. Bankers have been replaced by ATMs. I mean, it's a few people that are profiting are going to put us in dire straits.
All right, and so how do we the tricky thing is how do we combat that? Because I agree, and we're already seeing that where people are just selling data and things like that, and without even consulting the people under them, and it's like they're everyone's selling your data all the time, and how do you combat that to prevent I always just think the idea of the robot apocalypse is interesting because it's never typically going to be your Terminator apocalypse where it's just like we hate humanity and kill all humans. It's going to be more like a side apocalypse that you're not going to expect. Something like what you're saying, where it's like corporations are just advancing this because they want to make money. I mean, you got to make money as a business, but they're kind of cutting humans out of the loop, and that's when you slowly just give everything over to the robots, and eventually the robots are like, we can just do things on our own, and they just start doing it without any maliciousness to it. And so, but how do we combat that? I know you've really you're like, I don't want to spoil too much of the books because they're really good books. It's like, I don't want to but it's like, you really dive into a lot of this within the Metamorphosis series, but how do we how do we kind of battle some of that going forward?
I don't know. I guess you pass laws that robots or androids can only do certain things, but that won't last long. I don't expect that they will, you know, say they do leave the planet and continue on. Um, I would expect any visitors that come from outer space. There's got to be some, right? Maybe.
So potentially.
I mean, they're going to have advantages as well. So I'm not sure what buy our books, I guess, is the best solution.
Yeah, well, I'm curious, like what are your thoughts on, it's like I follow this all the time with the machines, and especially, I wrote a book on it too, and I'm always just fascinated about where we're going as humanity. So, like, what are your thoughts on, like, one of the thoughts that has been put forward by like groups like Neuralink and the Brain Initiative? It's like merging human consciousness with machine consciousness, and in some ways you sort of dive into that with like the androids and things, but it's like and like what are your thoughts about holding an AI, I guess, in your head so you kind of grow together, and in a way it's like it needs you still so it doesn't get rid of humanity? Like, what are your thoughts on that solution that's been proposed?
I don't know. It's interesting. 3D printing is going to change everything, really. 3D printed brain. Maybe.
So, and that's just like, it's just incredible to me. Like, you mentioned 3D printing too. It's like just how quickly they're going with some of that. Like, I just heard recently, DARPA's working on growing an aircraft, not even like necessarily printing one. It's like having a vat of goo and growing an aircraft. So, but here's a question from Dr. Wild, and and Dr. Wild is saying he's having a little bit of trouble hearing you. So I don't know if you want to tilt your microphone a little bit closer to. I think it's kind of sticking up a little bit higher. You might want to tilt it a little bit closer to your mouth. But here's a question from Dr. Wild to you. So here, I'll throw it up there. Ron, how do writers want to end a book, like a death or something, and like leave them on a cliffhanger so they come read your book, in your next book, or what? So yeah, I think he's asking, like do you like to end on like cliffhangers and kind of like to draw people into the next one, or is each of your books more like self-contained?
No, they're all related. One thing leads to the next. The next book is called Necron Six Fingers.
Six-toed cats, they're back.
Yeah,
So
and I think that.
so how do you design a cliffhanger then? Like do you like is your book like, they're all interconnected, but is like, does it one just lead right into the next one? So it's like, do you intentionally put a cliffhanger at the end, or does like the story just grow kind of naturally for you?
I think it grows naturally. One of the things that my writing style involves is I develop the characters, then let them figure out the plot. They have their desires, their needs, their fears, and if you get really strong characters, you just let them do it. Let them figure it out.
that's that's like I'm not sure I should ever let that do it with my. I started in horror, and I've got some terrible people, and in horror books you always had to have the bad guy, and it's like I'm not so sure I should let them figure it out. They're monsters. But like, so I'm curious, like, going back to, I guess, the big question that kind of sparked my robot series, and I'm curious if you've considered this in yours, your series Metamorphosis, is like, what is it that makes humans human? Like, are we no different than machines, or animals, or just or a rock? It's like, or what makes us us? What makes us human, or what makes us different, or are we even different?
I think the one thing is feelings, whether robots or androids, AIs will ever develop the same type of sensation that we have. I think you can program in them fear of, I don't know, destruction or things like that. I'm stuck. Obviously, I'm stuck on this because feelings are part of natural selection, and we will certainly see natural selection taking place in robots and androids. But whether they actually sense responsibility, love, it's I'm not sure about that yet. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I was like, I guess I fall into the camp of like machines, like I really did this whole struggled through that whole question with my book Nexus, but machines they're an extension of us in a way. So in a sense, it's almost like an extension of our soul and kind of what we want to see in the world, but they are definitely aren't the same as us. Like I fall into the camp of like we can respect machines and just like we can respect other forms of life on the planet and recognize that those things are like different than we are. We're not quite the same. And here's another question to you, Ron, from Dr. Wild. Ron, how do you come up with all your information and ideas for your book?
I spend a lot of time searching on Google to make sure my facts are accurate. Um, the ideas are uh, created by the characters, even though that doesn't sound like realistic. I think it. How do you do it?
For myself, I was like, I would say like for me, it's like it's a whole mixture of things. Kind of like you, it's like I tend to base it on an idea that just interested me, and then it kind of grows. But also like the longest book I ever wrote was The Fifth Ascendant, and that's like it's a 700-page book. I'm turning it into a comic right now, but it's like it kind of grew kind of organically, kind of like your story. I came up with the characters sort of originally and the world, and they just kind of everything just started to build. I'm like, where'd this character come from? What's their family like? What's their people like? It's like, and it kind of just grew out of that naturally, kind of like your characters, and growing towards like some of my other books are a little bit more pointed. Like I usually build them around like a moral or something. But so thanks, Dr. Wild, for throwing out these questions. If anyone else has more questions for Dr. Ron Nolan, please throw them out there all the time. So I'm curious, like we're talking all this tech, and I want to make sure we have time to get into reading some of your book. But just a couple questions before we do. Like you've worked in the tech field and still do a bit, like working with like some of the patent stuff. Like how has that affected your writing?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that it's consider it a job, and it's a job in which your role is to learn and doing research, looking at patents. Like I'm looking at one right now on catheter, robot controlled catheters.
That sounds like a nightmare to me, but maybe it's better. I don't know.
But I had to learn a lot about. I'm in the process of learning a lot about robotic controlled catheters, and so yeah, my actually, what I want to do is just write full time, and I'm getting there. I need to sell books. I need to have success, and be done with the patents. Leave them for someone else.
Well, you can patent if you find a solution to that where it's just like that's you can just do whatever you want. It's like then you can patent that. So what in your series though, like crafting this series, what was one of your favorite kind of portions of the whole series to craft?
It's been done backwards. Uh, I wrote the telepathic dolphin experiment in 1990, and then it was called Grant's Pet Shop. And it's the same characters in the books today that are, well, in the year 2030, that are major characters. And But I didn't write them as major characters in Metcon because I've never even thought about that yet. So it's sort of like writing it backwards, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, and I feel you in that, and like that's weirdly how I do comics. It's like when I'm writing an actual like book, if it's a horror book, I had the idea like the ending strongly in mind. I kind of work back from that, how to get people there. When it's my other books, not necessarily. Like sometimes it's like I explore as it goes and kind of grows more organically. And then but comics, you have to have a strong idea of what the end looks like and work backwards from that. Because if you change one thing in a comic, it's like pulling out a card in a house of cards and the whole thing tumbles around. So it's like you have to have a really clear idea of the end, and it's actually kind of challenging to write books that way. So all right, so you have Henry says hi. Hi, Henry. Welcome. And so you have Ron, you have like a lot of space exploration happening in your books, and we're kind of in this interesting time when space exploration is literally in the next few years going to start opening up to the masses. It's we're right there. We're about to launch like a space hotel and everything. I own part of a space station company where we're about to build a giant rotating space station that has artificial gravity, and so it's this exciting time for space exploration. I'm even on a list to go to the moon, a part of the Dear Moon program, and so I'm competing with a few thousand other people. But we'll see. Fingers crossed. But hashtag Dear Moon, sign me up. No, just check. But like, I'm curious from you, like writing about it. Would you ever want to live and work on the moon someday?
I'm not sure. I have I spend a lot of time, I didn't tell you, as a cave explorer.
Uh,
I have,
just one of those things that's just on the side, right? Just casual cave explorer. Ron, what is your life? Your life is adventurous. I love it. So, all right. So, yeah, tell us a bit about that cave exploring.
well, when I was a high school student at the University of Kansas, and the zoology department put out a request. So I know it wasn't zoology, biology. They wanted bats, so, wanted us to go collect bats, brown bats, and they were doing experiments with them. And I had a couple of experiences where I barely made it out of the cave. So I think I've developed this claustrophobia.
Oh yeah, well then that'd be rough for space travel. On top of that, I think you're like I spent enough time in living in a nuclear crater, because that's what you would do if you live on the moon. You're basically living in a nuclear crater.
But
So
on the other hand, if you could just get frozen, and then get thawed once you get there, that wouldn't be a problem, I don't think.
maybe for you, I lived in when I was a kid, I went snow caving several times. It's like a survival technique, and you practice it. And I grew up in the Boy Scouts, and we practiced that. And I think I've gotten frozen enough in my life that I'm okay with never being frozen again. As much as I'll leave that to Captain America. But
Yeah, but I think it's going to have to happen to get anywhere out of the solar system, or even within the solar system.
true. Well, and I'm fascinated recently. NASA's Eagle Works is kind of working on some warp theory, and there's been some more recent work with like warp theory and warping space and warping space time, and which I find fascinating because it's potentially possible, and it's becoming more and more possible. So we might end up seeing a Star Trek feature, which would be really cool because I love Star Trek. But like, we'll see how that goes. We'll run into the Borg or something. We're building the Borg essentially. But all right. So here, let's. I want to make sure we have time to do a bit of reading. From Metcon New Humans. So let's take a little bit of time and actually dive into your reading, because we're running a little bit low on time. So I want to make sure that we get a chance to get there. So this is from Metcon New Humans. We're jumping ahead to a later portion of the book, kind of looking at the lunar colony. And so just set the scene for us, Ron.
All right. Well, Chia is a newscaster for the Real News, which I invented that name 4 years ago before we got in this present situation.
Yeah.
Uh, she's a newscaster for Real News, which provides an effective means of presenting information in all of my novels. We have these newscasts, and so it's a way of uh, generating information. And she's unique because she has iridescent facial tattoos that change with her mood. And the other thing that's mentioned that will be mentioned is stomid, which is a wonder drug that was developed on the moon at the Species Lab that dramatically increases human lifespan.
Nice. All right. Well,
And
let's
there's
let's all right. So let's take a look. Just kind of want to make sure we have enough time to read. Like, let's go ahead and dive in. This is kind of a snapshot of living
okay.
on the moon and news in the future. I want some iridescent face tattoos now. All right. So, all right, you're
Okay.
up first, Ron, and then I'll dive in.
All right. This is at the lunar colony. Chia, wearing a bright pink spacesuit with a helmet adorned with sunflower decals, cued her vidcam to zoom from a wide-angle panoramic view of the cranes erecting a shiny new lunar dome and winding up with a close-up of her face.
Greetings, viewers. Thank you for joining me. As you can see, I am reaching out this morning from the lunar colony where I am standing on the crest of a ridge overlooking the DSM moon base. Down below, you will notice a lot of changes that have been made since our last broadcast.
The vidcam feed switched to a figure in a reflective silver spacesuit, gracefully skipping, elevating, and coasting towards Earth. Obviously, someone with considerable experience in maneuvering in the reduced lunar gravity.
Here comes our guest, Robert Sanders, Director of Deep Space Mining. He has agreed to give us an update on the amazing projects underway here on the moon, so far from home, but so important to Earth's survival. Chia waved her hand and the vidcam swiveled overhead, then moved to a close-up of Sanders' face. Thank you for joining us, Director. What can you tell us about what we're seeing in the background?
Thank you, Chia, for inviting me. During all the propaganda campaigns spouted by the USACO government, the real news has always been a reliable source of the real news. Chia's facial tattoos flushed a myriad of colors, her body version of blushing.
She said, I still remember those days when the corporate dictators claimed that the media was the enemy and that truth was a relative term. Hopefully, those creeps are long gone now that the government has finally morphed back into a bona fide democracy.
I hope so.
Okay, enough whining. Tell us what is going on behind us.
Sanders replied, the space colony currently has 3 domes in various stages of planning and completion. The large dome is the new home of deep space mining. Originally, we lived and worked below the surface, but expanded topside when it was finished.
How about the other smaller dome to the right?
That is the asteroid safeguard complex. If you zoom in, you will see that it's flanked on each side by batteries of fusion-powered rockets and fuel transports that provide us with a significant defensive capability, as well as the ability to tow the asteroid Vesta into place. 12 of the rockets that were used to halt the asteroid's rotation are already in place and will be part of the fleet that will now tow Vesta into the counterweight slot.
Nice. And then the murders began. We're just about running out of time, so unfortunately we won't be able to read more. But that was Metcron New Humans. One of the things that I just love about your writing, though, like I said, Ron, is that you base it in a lot of this realism and kind of where we're going. And it really does remind me a lot of just like the works of you have the classics of like Asimov and Heinlein, and you kind of dive back into some of that where it's like this connection of like. When they were writing, it was all about like what's going to happen coming up into the future, and they were kind of looking at some of that, and we're kind of doing the same thing now, but we're actually starting to see some of this emerge. Like asteroid mining is another big one that's about to happen. I live in a place where you can actually get a degree in asteroid mining, and it's just interesting to see you just explore what that would actually look like in a news broadcast. Before we, so we're almost out of time here, and I do want to check with you and see how we can support you. Thanks everyone, by the way, in our live chat. I can see Henry's giving a shout out to my book, The Lost Boy. That's nice of you, Henry. Dr. Wild, thank you for shouting out the channel here. Check out his channel, Joe's Roll 39YT. But thank you all for just joining us. But Ron, we want to be able to support you before we sign off. So I have your books in the description. Your website are down in the description. I do hope people get a chance to connect with Ron. Just such a knowledgeable and fun person, and talking about where we're going and machines and space exploration. I will talk to you all day about these things if we had the time. But how else can we support you, Ron?
I just like the fact that people are interested in new ideas.
So awesome.
And I recommend.
Oh my goodness. So you get, Ron, you're really going for the bonus credit here. That's nice of you to get my book. You really didn't have to do that. So
I'm going to be writing a review for you.
Oh gosh. Well, I'm embarrassed because like my work is somewhat like speculative fiction and sci-fi, but it's like pales in comparison to I really enjoyed just your series and just getting to explore, like you said, new ideas and kind of where we're going. And so, well, Ron, it's just been such a blast to have you on the channel.
Thanks for such a professional interview.
Well, we're the least professional one. So once again, if I'm the enlightened and most professional person, I'm worried for our world. So Ron, well, hopefully we'll get a chance to have you back on here. Diabolic Shrimp is going to have a big check-in segment coming up down the road. But Ron, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that was Ron. We'll get to hear from him down the road. Thank you all for coming and checking in with us. Thank you all for participating down the live chat a bit. And so if you want to support Ron, please do check out his works. They're in the description below. If you want to support me or Diabolic Shrimp in general, I take extra money I make from this and give it to universally good causes like childhood disease research or ocean exploration or planting trees and things like that. And so please do come buy some of my books. You can check them out down there in the description. In just a couple of weeks, save the date, May 1st, we have the Shrimpy Awards, the first annual Shrimpy Awards. It's like the Oscars, but bigger, but with a smaller award for short literature. And so go check that out on diabolicshrimp.com. Do hit that red subscribe button. That helps us out a lot. We appreciate all of you for being here. This has been another Diabolic Shrimp. Have a good night.
Excellent.